Hello, guys. We recently took interview from Sean Murray, who is a very well-known composer in film, TV, and game industry. You probably heard his works if you're watching movies like Deep Blue Sea or Buffy the Vampire Slayer series, or if you're playing to Call of Duty series like Black Ops and World at War. This is his soundtrack on the background right now. Pretty cool, huh? In this interview, he tells us about how he got into industry when he was just a kid, and about the experience working with big cinema and game studios. So let's jump right in. Now,
Nice to meet you, gentlemen.
Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
it's a beautiful day in LA.
Oh,
Yeah.
LA, great.
All
You
right.
working right now? You're calling us from your studio?
Yeah, I'm down in the
Please,
studio, just
please.
getting ready for scoring another movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Evgeny, are you ready?
I think
Yes,
yes. I think yes. I am.
Okay.
So I have a first question. It's as far as I know, you spent a lot of time on film sets since childhood. You even mentioned.
Yes.
You even mentioned somewhere that you chose the profession of a composer after meeting Brad Fiedel. Could you tell us how that happened? What attracted you to his work?
Yeah, I'll explain that to you. My father is a terrific actor who just died recently at the age of 94. Don Murray, who starred with Marilyn Monroe in Bus Stop. And you might know him also from Conquest, Planet of the Apes, and many, many movies. But he was directing a film in New York when I was a child, and he hired a composer that was just out of film school, and his name was Brad Fiedel, and it was his very first movie. So my father brought home the cassette tapes of his synthesizer work mocking up the score. And I just was blown away by the sound of the Moog synthesizer, you know? And so I learned all of the themes on the piano. And I said, wow, that's really cool. I want to write, I said to myself, I want to write scores for movies someday on synthesizers. So that's how that started. But I never actually got to meet Brad Fiedel. But he was part of my father's life for two movies. So.
So you never had the chance to work with Brad Fiedel after?
No, I didn't get to work with him.
Oh,
And I never met him. But he lived in Santa Barbara where my parents lived and where I grew up for part of my life. But it's a shame I didn't get to meet him.
yeah. But if we're speaking about other composers, for example, which contemporary composers inspire you now?
Oh my gosh. Well, I loved James Horner. He was one of my favorites. God, Hans Zimmer's fantastic. I love Harry Gregson Williams. I love, just so many guys. But right now, I think James Horner is probably overall my favorite composer of all time. And then you could put in like Jerry Goldsmith, who I always draw inspiration from. And also loved Elmer Bernstein, who I knew personally. And I worked with Elmer's daughter. She was my orchestrator for both of my Call of Duties. She orchestrated Call of Duty World at War and Call of Duty Black Ops. So when I had the orchestra, I used Elmer Bernstein's daughter as my orchestrator. And one of my favorites, though, was very famous in the 70s, and it's a guy named Michael Small. So I have a lot of influence from Michael Small, for sure.
Jerry Goldsmith, that's the one who worked on recent Planet of Apes, right? He was writing the score for that.
Well, he wrote the original music for the first Planet of the Apes.
Oh.
And I don't believe he did he may have done the second one as well. But Jerry Goldsmith is, he's one of the masters. Very famous for the Mummy movies. Very famous for, oh God, any number of huge motion pictures. He was one of the United States' biggest composers.
First game you composed music was a True Crime. How did that come about? Actors go through casting and are approved by producers and directors. How do composers get involved in such projects?
Well, this was funny. My brother-in-law was working on a kung fu game. And I was working on a TV series, God, the Devil, and Bob, and I had just done the second season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And so Chris Ocasek, who is the son of Rick Ocasek, the singer of The Cars, he was an art director on this kung fu video game. And I thought it was going to be like some kind of little handheld Game Boy, some little tiny thing. So he invited me to come down to Activision one day to look at what they were doing. And of course I looked at that and I was blown away. I mean, it looked like a movie and the cinematics were all very dramatic, just like a movie. So they were looking for a composer, and the head of the company, Peter, was a fan of my work from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and some of the other things I had done, and the Savage Dragon. So they asked if I would do a scene for them, a cinematic scene. So I ended up doing 1 or 2 scenes, and I gave that to the guys. So they had some other people that they were looking at, and they did some scenes as well. But when they got the music in, they were very democratic. They said, let's all vote on who we like the best. And I was lucky. The whole crew, everyone working on the game, got to vote, and they voted for me to do the score. So that's how I got into the video game world.
As I remember, you wrote an opera with your father for a second game.
Yeah, I did, for True Crime New York City. Did a crazy opera piece for that. And it was so much fun. I can't remember what I based it on, maybe Barber of Seville. Yeah, I can't remember what inspired that, but it was really fun. So it was like a hip hop opera. I ended up starting it very kind of classical, like a classical opera, and then I brought in the hip hop drums and made it kind of crazy. It was fun. And that was the first time I worked with this wonderful singer, Jane Runnels, who went on to do Call of Duty World at War, and she sang on Black Ops, and she sang on many of my soundtracks. Yeah.
I have a personal question, maybe. Your father wrote lyrics for this opera. And,
what's that?
Yeah,
yes, my father, yes.
Right.
He wrote
So
the lyrics.
Right, correct. How does he react to this collaboration of you and him writing the opera for this?
Well, it's funny. My father, he spoke fluent German, and he spoke fluent Italian. So I told my father, I wrote this beautiful melody, and here's what I want the voice to sound like. Here's the melody for the voice. So he just listened to that and wrote out the lyrics, some fun lyrics in Italian, and I can't even remember what they were. But it really came out great. If I looked in my notes, I could probably find what those lyrics were. But yeah, that was really fun. He also my father wrote the German words that we used in Call of Duty World at War.
The German words, you said?
Yes, I had Jane Runnels singing in German, Brav Soldat. So Brav Soldat was the name of the piece.
Uh-huh.
And she was singing, like, taunting the Russian soldiers. So she's singing, Brav Soldat, brave soldier, come with me, die with me, brave soldier. So my father wrote that in German.
Wow, these are really strong words. It's like,
It's great. This was when I believe the Red Army had entered Berlin. I think it was part of the Berlin campaign.
Okay, I have a following question on top of that. So since you were working on World War and Black Ops and have you had to study the history of World War II and the Cold War in order to convey the heavy atmosphere and the hardships that the soldier faced in the battlefield?
Yeah, I knew a lot about World War II back then, even 15, 16 years ago. I'd always been kind of very interested in World War II history, very interested in the politics and the weaponry of World War II. It's very interesting to me. So I always followed it, and I knew of some of the big battles. I knew the biggest tank battle, which was, I believe the one in Kursk. Biggest tank battle in the history of the world was between the Soviet army and the German army. And there was the Battle of Silo, which was another huge battle between the Russians and the Germans. So I knew about that. And I knew a lot about also the Pacific theater, and of course, the invasion of Normandy and the history of how the Allies started in North Africa. So yeah, I'm very interested in World War II.
So it helps you to convey the hardships of the soldiers on the battlefield?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
And of course, I was a big fan of the movie Enemy at the Gates, and with Ron Perlman and got the other actor's name, but that was a terrific film. And I think World at War really drew upon that movie to get the proper atmosphere for the attack on Berlin. I think that film really inspired World at War.
I will ask you on the Russian language because I'm worst English speaker in the world. I think Efima can translate my questions. Когда вы перестали работать на True Crime и перешли к Call of Duty, что изменилось в вашей работе? Как-то изменился технологический процесс?
So the question... okay, so you're fluent in Russian too.
Oh, yes, of course.
Can we continue in Russian language then?
Yes, no здоровья.
So, the question was, so when you stopped working on True Crime and moved to Call of Duty, did the process of writing composition change somehow, or was it the same?
Completely different. True Crime was very hip hop driven, and also had a little bit of a film noir sort of feel to it, mixed with kind of hip hop elements. So obviously we did completely different orchestral music from World at War and Black Ops. And I was inspired by, some mid-century composers like Lazaroff and also Ligeti, very much so. Ligeti was a Polish composer. And so I drew upon mid-century composers for that vibe. And also I wanted to do something very different from the typical war movies of the early 2000s, like Saving Private Ryan. And the first Call of Duty games were very much along that Saving Private Ryan, John Williams sort of vibe. And I wanted to do something more modern and not be, compelled to write in that kind of, strict style. So I used a lot of electronica and a lot of treated instruments. The EBow I used quite a bit on the guitar, which vibrates the strings on the guitar and gives you almost a violin sort of sound. And yeah, I experimented a lot with sounds, and then of course I used a lot of the shakuhachis, and then Eastern European instruments, balalaika, and I used let's see, also the Celeste very much, and some interesting Eastern European flutes as well.
Balalaika is a very specific instrument.
Yeah.
Have you working with balalaika sound before?
I've just been using the sampled sounds of it and just experimenting with that, and also the hurdy-gurdy is another interesting one. Hurdy-gurdy is like a violin that has a rotating kind of cup on it that vibrates the strings. So I use that, and some other instruments that I could come back and fill you in with what they were specifically.
Я хотел спросить про технологический процесс в True Crime. Насколько я помню, вам присылали какие-то катсцены и записи игрового процесса. Как работа стояла в Call of Duty? Потому что я уверен, что музыка писалась еще в то время, когда многие материалы еще не были готовы для показа.
So Eugene asks that over time, games have become bigger and more technologically advanced. Did anything change in your work with music for games when you started working?
Well, yes. From True Crime to Call of Duty, it was really cool. I was able to get hooked up into Activision and to Treyarch. So I had my computer hooked up, so when they placed the music into the game, I could instantly monitor it and see how it was working. So from there, I was able to make changes and tweak it to really make it fit with the game even better, having that instant access to seeing how it played in the game. So that's really cool, and they give you God mode, which is great because you don't get shot when you're in God mode. You don't die. So you can play through all the levels and get shot a million times and, machine gun, and then you can play all the way through without getting killed.
It's amazing.
I don't remember.
But yeah, just being hooked into their computer system, their mainframe or whatever you would call it, was a real big advantage, rather than just having to send in clips from True Crime and get feedback that way. You could get a lot of instant feedback. I like God mode.
How long did it take you to work on the soundtrack to World War on Black Ops?
Both. I spent about 11 months on both of those, almost a year on each one, and they had 2 years to complete the game. So the Treyarch would do one, and then Infinity Ward would be working on the next game. So they would stagger their releases for every year. So that gave them 2 years to develop and release, and they were always released in November. So yeah, so as soon as they started, a year into the project is when the music started. And yeah, it was very intense. I didn't have ghostwriters and other people writing for me, so it was just me working on that myself for 11 months. And then, of course, we had the orchestras, and I worked with Emily Bernstein as my orchestrator. And then I had, would bring in various musicians to play live instruments in my studio.
А музыку, которую вы писали, вы сначала писали в Праге, а потом уже в США на студии Warner Bros. Что-то изменилось? Есть ли какая-то разница между записью в Европе и в США?
The music you were written in Prague and then in the studio at Warner Bros. In USA. Is there a difference between writing compositions there and here in US?
What I liked about Prague, and I've probably said that I've said this in other interviews, but what I really liked about Prague is that the Nazis had occupied it, and where I recorded at the Smeky Sound Studios was an old dance hall, and during World War II, you would have been very common to have Nazis using that as an entertainment and dance hall. And it was also a building that Einstein had spent a lot of time at. I believe he did lectures there at that hall. So as I was walking up the stairs, these big stone stairs up to the dance hall stage, you could just imagine the sound of those Nazi boots going up and down, you know, their big goose stepping boots going up and down the stairs. So, and you saw some of the damage to the city from World War II, some of the buildings that were still bombed and showed scars of the conflict. So that was very interesting. And I have to say the string players in the Czech Republic had a real pathos, had a real interesting feel that I really liked. And it led itself very well to, you know, the European music, European theater for World at War. They had a certain emotion that they brought to it. And I do remember some of the horn players for the Americana stuff for like the Japanese campaigns, the Pacific campaigns. Some of the brass players had a little bit of a hard time playing some of my big, bold, high notes on the trumpets. They got a little red-faced and a little pissed off at me for writing some parts that made it a little challenging for them. But yeah, so being there in Prague, being in a city that was occupied by the Nazis, really had a great impact on the score. And I was able to make changes while I was there, and Emily and I would, you know, adjust things as we were hearing it on the soundstage. So that was terrific. I really think that had a lot of impact on the soul of that score.
It's amazing how the history and the whole environment can help you to write the music, inspire you. At the end of the World War, when the hero raised the flag of the Reichstag, the Soviet anthem plays. Was it recorded as well? Who performed it? And did the singers know Russian language?
No. So what we did is I had written that piece, obviously, in Los Angeles, and I needed to come up with some lyrics to sing to it. And I had Emily write the lyrics for that one. And basically, I didn't know shit. We didn't know any Russian, so we just used Latin words. And I just had Emily come up with a whole string of Latin words. I don't even know what the fuck we were saying. So the whole thing, I have no idea what the Latin words meant. But because we had the Czech singers, you know, they had a little bit of an accent that they could sell as maybe being Russian, but it, you know, I kind of used the Soviet, Anthem as sort of an inspiration to get the vibe of how I wanted that piece to sound. But that's obviously one of my most famous pieces of music from that game. Everybody loves it. I think one YouTube channel, unfortunately not mine, has at least 13 million views. 13 million views of what I just called that theme Russians. And that has 13 million views on YouTube on just one channel alone.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, yes, if it has like 30 million views on one channel, probably in other channels also have that, you know?
Yeah, so 13 million, it's pretty amazing.
But
that was really fun. So I had a big choir about 50 singers that were able to give us that big sound.
Я надеюсь, что из этого видео мы тоже сделаем какой-то ролик на YouTube, который соберет 13 миллионов просмотров.
Yeah, Evgeny, he said that he hopes that this video on YouTube will gain about 30 million on YouTube too.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. I love it.
Next question is about Black Ops. Женя, спросишь?
Да. In Black Ops, the player's character progresses through a mental illness, becoming guided by his own hallucinations, which the player might not realize until the very end. How did you reflect his state in your music?
Well, there's a very interesting movie from 1972 or 1973 called The Parallax View. And that was directed by Alan Pakula. And also, my mother happened to have a very small part in the film as well. So that's why I knew about the movie at such a young age. And Warren Beatty was the star of it. So Warren Beatty is basically, he's brainwashed into being like one of those sleeper assassins. And he didn't know that he was brainwashed, but he was brainwashed and was to become an assassin. And we know of that from a program that the CIA had called MK Ultra. You may know about MK Ultra, where they brainwash, use mind control, drugs to turn people into assassins, sort of like the Bourne Identity. So the movie Parallax View was very similar to what they were trying to do in Black Ops. So I used that as kind of the inspiration, and that was a Michael Small score. So again, Michael Small had some influence on the kind of music I was writing for Black Ops in some of those scenes.
So in one of the interviews, you said that you didn't listen to the previous scores for Call of Duty because you didn't want to be influenced, right? You didn't want to take something from them. But do you inspire from movies then? You said Saving Private Ryan, maybe someone else?
No, I didn't listen to really any of those, like Saving Private Ryan and the previous Call of Duties, because I wanted to do my own thing and just be a little bit, more unique and different and give it its own unique flavor. I think that's why people responded so much to the music on both of those games. I mean, I can tell you, people even after 14 years after Black Ops, if I tell somebody I wrote the music for that, they can start singing the menu music. They'll start going, oh yeah, the menu music for that. And everybody, responded to that and remembers a lot of that score.
В Black Ops есть трек Beheaded, он называется, и там звучит именно тот текст, о котором мы говорили раньше. Там не очень можно разобрать слова, и интернет ничего об этом не знает.
So yeah, he has a question about the track for Black Ops called Beheaded.
Yes.
The thing is, he can't find the words on internet. What is the text there? You were speaking about that before, right?
That's, again, my singer, Jane Runnels, and we were just making up words. Totally made up. And she was just trying to sound like Eastern European. And maybe Bulgarian. I think we used some Bulgarka women's choir I listened to. And the Bulgarka women's choir was famous in the United States during the 80s and 90s. So we just kind of emulated a little bit of the sound from the Bulgarka women's choir. And again, made up words. So she was just basically singing gibberish. But it sounded cool, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of making up in your job, It's like,
yeah. You know what? I always tell people when I write music for video games or movies, I'm really just acting with music. So I consider myself more of about everything just musically. I'm thinking about things cinematically and almost as an actor with music. So that's kind of been my philosophy throughout my career.
Years later, you created the soundtrack for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, right?
I did some music for that, yeah.
Yeah, your music is heard by players all over the world every day. But do you, and you're like composing scores for games, but do you play games yourself though?
Yes. I like Horizon, sorry, which is the driving game? Horizon, something like that. I used to play that a few years ago with my daughter quite a bit. It's a driving game. Do you know the name of this? Horizon.
Zero Dawn.
Forza.
Forza Horizon. Yes.
Forza.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I played that a lot a few years ago with my daughter, and I like just cruising around Italy and France, and then there was the one that was in Australia as well. So I played that one, and then I played World of Tanks quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I loved World of Tanks, but in the last few years I haven't been playing as much. But those two were the ones that I played the most, and I haven't played a Call of Duty since working on Black Ops.
But you played but you played Black Ops in World War, right?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. I played them both very much.
У меня есть еще один вопрос про Black Ops. Вы, когда сделали саундтрек для первой части, вы задали определенную планку для всех, кто делал музыку для Black Ops после вас, включая Джека Волла или Брайана Тьюка, с которым вы работали над True Crime. Вы слышали их работы? Не знаете, может быть, они обращались к вам за консультацией какой-либо вообще, или как?
So you created the soundtrack for the first game of Black Ops series, setting a certain standard for everyone who worked after you. Jack Wall and even Brian Hugh brought you into True Crime, right?
Yeah.
So have you heard their works? Have they ever consulted you somehow?
No one ever consulted me, and that's fine. I don't know. They may have used some of my themes in the other games, and I wouldn't even know because I never played them. But I hope they did. That would be nice if they took some themes and expanded on them. For example, I did a movie, Deep Blue Sea 2, and somebody else did Deep Blue Sea 3, and I never heard what they did, and I'm sure they didn't listen to what I did. But, there was one film where they took a theme from the original. They took a theme from mine and reworked it for the sequel, and that was Accident Man with Scott Adkins. So I did the original Accident Man, and Accident Man 2, they had a different composer, but they wanted to use my theme for it. So I gave them the rights to do that. And it was really, really cool to hear somebody else's interpretation of what I had done.
Right. These are the movies with Scott Adkins, right?
Yes, Accident
Working
Man.
with them a lot. Accident. Yeah. We also have an actor from Russia you were working with. It's Alexander Nevsky.
Yes.
You remember? Yeah. So he has.
Oh yeah, he's a good friend.
Oh, he's your friend.
Yeah, very good
Wow.
friend.
Do you mind? He has a big fan base here, and the editorial team is located in the same building where he was filming his movie Maximum Impact.
Oh yes, I scored Maximum Impact. I did the music.
We know that, right?
Yeah.
Do you mind answering a few questions about working with Alexander Nevsky?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Я так понимаю, первый фильм с Александром Невским у вас был «Черная роза», где еще снималась та девушка из «Терминатора». Кстати, вот и ваша общая с Брайаном Фиделем еще. Что интересного было в работе с Александром?
The first project you were working with Alexander Nevsky probably was Black Rose, and that was starring the actress from Terminator.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
she was terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, but what was interesting about working with Alexander Nevsky? What things you were noticing?
You know what? For Black Rose, they hired me because he was interested in a film that I did called Crusader back in 2007 and 2008. So he liked that score, and he was able to get in touch with me through his executive producer who had worked with me. And he was a big fan of Black Ops. And that's why he really wanted me to do that score. So really enjoyed that, loved collaborating with him on that project. And that's where we struck up our good friendship.
То есть он тоже играет в видеоигры, что ли?
Oh yeah, so the Alexander Nevsky also plays video games, right?
Yes. So he was a fan of Black Ops. Yeah, he was a big player at Black Ops. So there you go.
That's interesting. We also have the question about video games and Alexander Nevsky. So you've done several projects with him, comedies, action films, even vaster, right?
Mhm.
But the only missing film from this list is a film based on a video game. And Alexander's fans have long been asking him to make a movie based on the Series Sam series. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't. What is it?
Series Sam, the game, is like his fans think that he looks like the main character, Serious Sam.
Serious Sam?
Serious Sam, yeah. Never
I
heard
gotta
about
look
it?
that up. Sorry. Give me a second.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So then back to movies.
Да, и в нашей редакции есть люди, которые хотели бы задать вам вопросы по музыке, которые никак не связаны с вашим творчеством, возможно. Это коллега вот очень сильно просил спросить, вы знакомы с творчеством британского певца Морриси?
Their editorial office is like, as I mentioned, their editorial office is located in the same building where was shooting the Maximum Impact, but they have questions that are not related to the topic of the interview, though. Are you familiar with the work of British singer Morrissey?
Who is it?
Like the British singer Morrissey?
Yes.
No.
Yes, Morrissey.
Really?
Yes.
Do you like his music?
You know what? I'd have to say I was never a big fan of Morrissey, but my wife was infatuated with him in the 80s. She had posters of him all over the walls, all over her walls, just as she did with Duran Duran. But there was one song by Morrissey that I loved, and it had this really cool guitar part that was very vibrato-like. I can't remember what the name of that song was, and it had this great line that goes,
I think I know this.
Do you remember this song?
I think I know that song, but I don't remember her name too.
Yeah, that was a good song. But no, not a huge fan, but I know that Morrissey lives here in Los Angeles. So people I know have seen him around, so it's kind of cool.
And speaking of music for films, in 2023, 7 films of your music were released. How do you manage it all? How do you...
Yeah, there were a lot of releases last year. Yeah, I was kind of working like crazy all through COVID. See, when the COVID bullshit happened, and I will call it bullshit, when they locked everything down, it's horrible for the world. The entire world suffered from that. But luckily, I had a film that had 2 films that had been shot before all of the shutdowns, and they shut down film production. So I was able to work for, a good half a year through that. And then we did another film during that time with my great director, Jesse Johnson, who I work with all the time, from Accident Man, The Debt Collectors. We did a film during the COVID shit called Hell Hath No Fury. And that was great. That was a World War II film. And it took place in a cemetery, and it was about a woman who had slept with a Nazi soldier and was kidnapped by some American soldiers because they thought that she knew where gold was buried in that cemetery. Really great film. Please watch it, guys. It's called Hell Hath No Fury.
Yeah, I found it.
Yeah, terrific film. And I'll tell you something fun about that is in Jesse Johnson movies, he puts me in the movies a lot as a stuntman.
As a stuntman?
Yeah. So I do a lot of shootout scenes. I've done scenes where I've been in Boudica, Queen of War, which came out last year. I get shot with an arrow, and you can see me spitting up blood. In Accident Man, I get killed. I'm shooting an Uzi in that, and I get sliced with a katana.
Это вас там Ольга Куриленко так убивает? Ольга Куриленко kills you in that movie.
Yes. No, I think a Roman kills me in that one. But yes, in One Ranger, I get shot by Thomas Jane. I have a nice big close-up with the blood pack spurting. I love doing this stuff. And the funny thing about Hell Hath No Fury is I played a Nazi who's dragged into the woods by Soviet soldiers. And they execute me in the woods. So I'm the Nazi in that scene.
Wow. Wow.
So I get executed with the Papashaw machine gun. You know the Papashaw?
Really? We need to go
Russian machine gun?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, да.
Yeah.
Right.
The submachine gun. Looks like a Thompson.
Right.
So that's kind of fun. Yeah, I like to do the stunts in the movies.
So that's interesting. I mean, despite everything, you continue to be an actor as your father did, right? So
It's not really acting, doing stunt work, but it's being on screen and it's kind of fun. It's just fun.
Way.
It reminds when I was a kid, I used to go to the movie sets when my dad was shooting. And for example, Conquest, Planet of the Apes. That was the fourth Planet of the Apes. Yeah. I was on the movie set and I watched them put the makeup on the actors, on Roddy McDowall. I was in one scene, I was sitting underneath the stage where my father's character was talking and they had the apes with them. So I was actually under the stage when they were filming that, when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
So I always loved going to the film sets and the excitement of seeing the stunts being done and all of that stuff. I love that.
Okay, since you were talking about your childhood, if I may, so you started with, you realized you wanted to become a composer at an early age, right? Do you consider yourself lucky to have realized so early that you wanted to dedicate your life to music?
Yeah, I really did. And it was, I have to tell you guys, it was that cassette tape of Brad Fiedel and the sound of the Moog synthesizers that did it for me. And from that age of 10 years old, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write music for movies. I also wanted to be a rock star, of course, like everybody. So I wrote songs and I had bands. But I also, when I was 16, I started doing student films. And by the time I was 19, I think I had done 70 or 80 short films. And I had an early computer, which was the Commodore 64. And I started doing MIDI stuff in 1984 when MIDI came out. I had an Oberheim synthesizer, a sequencer, I had some Yamaha synthesizers, and a DX7, which I hooked up to SMPTE. And so I started doing student films, and that's how I learned how to compose for film, is all of that experience. And so by the time I was 19, I was able to get my first movie. But yes, that inspiration by Brad Fiedel was really the catalyst for me to become a film score, and also the influence of two other famous composers, Barry Dvorak, who did Rolling Thunder, he did The Warriors, he wrote the theme song for SWAT. Barry Dvorak. Warriors was a very famous film from 1977. So he was good friends with my father, and he encouraged my father, to buy me the equipment to record music. So Barry was responsible for me getting a 16-track recorder and he was the one that told my dad to go and spend the money on his kid. Spend some money on your kid, buy him some gear. Let him, if he's really into it and he wants to record. So that's, yeah. My father was very helpful in that.
That's amazing, because a lot of people looking for their path and craft for decades, and you're like on it.
Yeah, I'm lucky, you know, as a weirdo that just said, that's what I'm going to do. And I was, you know, I practiced guitar 5 hours a day. Always had the guitar in my head. Piano lessons, always playing the piano. And yeah, it was a lot of band practice, a lot of time in my studio. So I just love being in the studio, as you can tell. I'm at home in my studio.
Окей, у вас очень богатая фильмография. Над какими из проектов было труднее всего работать?
We have just a few more questions. Evgeny asks about, he says that you have a very rich filmography, and which project was the hardest to work on and why?
Oh God, I have to tell you, the hardest project I had the hardest time with comedy. It's harder for me to do comedy than it is to do big action or you know, dramatic scenes, because I like bold cinematic statements. Comedy can be very frivolous and silly. So I did a TV series called God, the Devil, and Bob. And what was cool about that is I got to do like kind of horror stuff, some big kind of orchestral, gothic sort of cues for that, for the show. But then I had to do the silly little 2-second bumpers, like little transitions. Oh my God, I went nuts trying to figure that out. How do you make a statement in 2 seconds, a second and a half? So I quickly learned, get a bass guitar, play a couple of notes, slap you know, some drums on it, and you know, maybe a little guitar, and boom, you're done. So almost like the Seinfeld thing. You know, so I had to learn how to do these stupid little 2-second cues, and I found that very hard to do at first until I figured out a formula. So much harder than writing an opera.
Right. I like how you imitate the sounds.
Sorry.
Okay. We have a few questions though left. My question is, I watched your interview from 30 years ago with GameSpot, and you mentioned that the music should be interactive. The score should be interactive, giving the player the choice what score he wants to listen to during the game process, right?
No, you know what? I suppose in Counter-Strike, when I did that game pack for Counter-Strike, you could download whatever they had a number of composers that you could get download their music pack. Mm-hmm. So that's Counter-Strike seemed to be very popular with my music pack. So in that regard, for that game, that was interactive by the user being able to choose what composer he wanted. Mm-hmm. But as far as, the video game, like Call of Duty, so I've explained this before, but I would get have them play through one level, and I would score the entire level with one piece of music. Then I'd score the same level with another piece of music that was different and had a different character to it. Maybe one would be slower in tempo. Maybe the other would be much faster tempo. So that gave the game programmers the ability to change to different kind of vibes within one level of the game. So the more cues that you give to the developer and the sound guys that have a relative key that makes sense to switch to dynamically, a relative key so it doesn't sound like a completely different piece of music, that's how you got your gameplay changes and dynamics by being able to switch pieces of music. And that was definitely controlled by what the user, the game player, did. If you got shot, or if you went down this hallway, or if you went over that hill, then you'd get a different piece of music. So it's very complex, and that's why, you know, there was over 3 hours of music for both of World at War and Black Ops.
But in terms of the whole writing process, the question, could you describe your writing process? How do you create the music?
Okay, so what I'll do is when I'm working on a movie, video game, it's the same thing. I've already discussed with the director what he wants to achieve with the score. What are you trying to do? He may give me some examples of some scores that he likes, some composers that he likes, and I'll try and keep that in mind. But what I'll do is either I'll pick the hardest scene to go with first, maybe a main title, the very first piece of music for the opening of the movie. Sometimes I'll choose to do that first. And if you do that first, then usually you have a strong theme that you can work with and utilize in other places in the movie. And it becomes, you know, a theme for the film. Sometimes I'll take the easy way. Say I start on a Tuesday and I'm like, shit, you know what, man? I just want to do something. I want to ease my way into the movie this time. Mm-hmm. So I'll just pick a really simple scene. Mm-hmm. You know, with not much going on, maybe dialogue heavy, and maybe I'll just start with an atmospheric thing with a few pads on the synthesizer. Or I'll pick another scene that has some action to it and just start off with the rhythm track. So it's completely random what I choose to work on from day to day. But whether I start in the middle or from the beginning, I'm still going to develop themes from that first scene that I work on. And that's what's so fun about it, is every day you don't know what you're going to do until you get downstairs and you get in front of the keyboards and you start playing with it. So, yeah. But I always kind of work by this rule to try and get 2 minutes of music completely finished each day. That means mixed, recorded, mastered, and laid down. 2 minutes a day.
2 minutes a day. Is it enough?
At least. Oh, yes. So if you're working on a film for 6 weeks and you get 2 minutes a day, you know, you're up to 45, 50 minutes of music. So, but I have to tell you, most films that I do usually have over an hour of music, maybe an hour and a half. Some movies, maybe only, 90 minutes, will only have 5 minutes with no music. So it depends. So sometimes the score will go throughout almost the entire movie. Sometimes it's more sparse. It depends on what the director wants.
Кстати говоря, о режиссерах, вы работали с разными, и Джосс Уидон, и Джесси Джонсон, и тот же Александр Невский. Вот в чем отличается их метод работы касательно работы с музыкой?
So he asked, what you were working with different directors, Joss Whedon, Alexander Nevsky, and
Jesse Johnson.
Jesse Johnson. And the question is, what's the difference between their process in working, creating a movie?
Well, Joss Whedon, when you do a TV series, you don't have much time to interact and get directions. You have one meeting at the beginning of the week, and you talk about where they want the music to come in, where it goes out. So it's one meeting, and then you have maybe 4 days to write the music, just 4 days. So that's very quick. Alexander is very interactive with me. He'll come in and make suggestions for changes, or can we do this here? Can we add something here? So Alexander's very good creatively like that. Jesse is probably the most interactive director that I've worked with. He and I will go back and forth a lot on pieces of music. Sometimes we'll throw music away. Sometimes we'll take one theme and put it in another place. So Jesse and I really have a good back and forth on what to do. And he's always got very interesting and great suggestions of what to do. But usually, they leave you alone, and then you come in, you do your thing, and then you come in and suggest changes, and they'll say, it's not quite giving me the feel I want. It's not quite doing what I think the scene needs. And then you throw it away and you start again. And I really enjoy doing that, because the more challenges you give me with the score, the harder I'm going to work at it. And it's always better. If you throw away a piece of music or redo a piece of music, I always feel that it improves. So I never get discouraged when people want changes. I invite changes and suggestions.
Right. Honestly, we are out of questions, but I guess I ask one last before we let you go. Thank you for the interview, by the way.
Yeah,
we really
great.
appreciate your time.
Sure.
We'll send you the link right after we edit it. Yeah. So
Great.
one last question. They already asked you in previous interviews, but since the industry changed a lot, and especially now, are there any tips for beginning composers who just started?
Yeah, and I've said this so many times. If you want to become a composer, you need to meet filmmakers. You need to meet producers, but more importantly, directors. And the way to meet young directors is to go to your film schools and meet guys that are doing short films. Even, maybe your friends are making some short films. So you have to demand you let them score your short film. You have to be a pest. You have to be bold, and you have to have purpose, and you have to keep at it. And the more people you ask, the greater chance you have of being able to do something. I always asked to get my jobs, and I was just relentless in pursuing it at a young age. So having that experience of doing all those student films, that really that's the best advice I can get, is student films and young. Oh, listen, it's my ringtone.
Can you hear it? Oh.
Accident man. So, yeah, just be relentless. Ask people to let you score their projects, and you've got to just be driven. But that's the best advice I can give to anyone that's young and starting out wanting to get into it.
Right, so driven and passionate about your craft, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And you got to be a pain in the ass. Somebody doesn't want to hire you. You know what? Just keep trying. Maybe you get a chance at doing something.
Oh, that's the good question. You gotta be. I mean,
if you don't try, look. There was a movie that I made called Ocean Tribe, and the way I got that movie was interesting. I was living with my brother in Malibu, and all of a sudden, one day, this film truck pulls up to my house. So I asked my brother, "What the hell's going on, man?" And he said, "Oh, they're shooting a movie here today." I said, "They are? Who is it?" He said, "Oh, it's some guy, I don't know. I met through a producer. So they're using our house as a location." I'm like, "Great." So I went to the director. I introduced myself when they were on a break, and I said, "Here's my CD. Here's some of the previous things I've done." And I said, "Do you have a composer?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, listen to my stuff, man." And he loved it, and he hired me. So that all that stuff, you got to take any opportunity that is given to you. So I took that opportunity and it just worked out. I had the goods. I had music and films that he could look at, but you don't get anywhere if you don't ask.
Yeah, that's the great advice, honestly. So.
Well, and I thank you guys for asking me for the interview. So you don't get it if you don't ask. You get it.
Right.
Eugene?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Please, I
I
have
appreciate
one
it.
question. Last question. Вы все еще играете в танки World of Tanks? And какие ветки танков вы прокачиваете там?
Okay, do you still play tanks? And if you do, what tanks do you use and what tanks do you upgrade though?
I like the what is it? The T-15. What's the Russian tank? The
T-34.
T-34. I use that a lot. Sometimes I use the silly little Japanese tanks just to get killed fast. But yeah, I like the T-34s. They were fun. And then I guess the Sherman tanks too. I like those.
Great.
But yeah, that was a fun game. Now you reminded me how much I enjoyed playing that. I'm going to go and play it tonight.
Right. Yeah, and I
Okay.
want to replay Call of Duty again.
Oh, it'd be great. Yeah, World at War. Watch if you can play that one again. That should be exciting for you guys.
Right.
Сегодня же это
Now we're going to
сделали.
pay more attention to the sport.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much for your time again. Yeah, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right.
We'll send you the link as soon as we're going to edit the video.
Terrific. And if I look stupid, just edit it out. Edit it out.
Okay, we'll
Or if
do.
I look like shit, just edit it out.
Okay, we'll do.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Yes, thank you.